Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I'm your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about the debates last week between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And also, we have a special interview with the host of the Stretchgoose podcast. So stay tuned to hear that. So let's get started. But before we do, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. And also, if you'd like to hear an extended version of this episode, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. Links in the description and show notes below. Alright, so first we're going to talk about the debates that happened last week real quick. In my opinion, I don't think it mattered too much. Nobody really won, in my view, as usual. Usually, if you think one candidate that you like, usually the candidate you like is the one who wins, for the most part. But overall, I don't think Trump did that great of a job. I don't think he did too terribly. He had some misses, in regards to how he could have addressed some of the questions.
Right.
But I got a couple little notes, like I got like two of my favorite, what I thought he did do a pretty good job at. The first one was when they got to the abortion issue. I thought he did a pretty good job at arguing that the issue has been returned back to the states and the people are out voting, and in some places, even though like it might be a red state, people are still voting for more liberal abortion policies, like here in Ohio.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point.
So I thought he did a pretty good job at explaining that and arguing that point. And they kept trying to ask him, or in some cases even lie about the fact that he's going to sign a national abortion ban.
Right.
Which he said multiple times it's not in his agenda to do so.
No, I think I figured out where you were going, but I think you've actually been more articulate on that than he was. I mean, just a slight bit, I think, but yeah, I mean, I totally see that. I think he did a good job of explaining it too. I just think that it's something that goes over most people's heads. Like, Why would he want to do a national abortion ban when he's just returned this to the states and he's so proud of that?
Yeah, right? Exactly. And one thing I keep thinking about is, he's, as we just said, repeatedly said it's back to the states, and that's the way he wants it to be.
Right.
And
he's looking around and saying how wonderful, some of them are more liberal than you'd think they'd be.
Right.
Ohio, more liberal than you'd think.
Yeah.
And, he's not necessarily saying, great for them for going liberal, but it's great that the American people are having a chance to speak on this,
Right, yeah. That's like exactly what he said. He said the people get to vote on it.
Yep.
But the other thing is, they keep lying about the fact that he's gonna push a national abortion ban, and that's so terrible. But yet, on the other side, it's totally cool for the government to reinstate all the abortion policies. And with that, the one thing I think would be good to ask of Kamala Harris or any Democrat really is if they institute a national abortion protections, does that mean doctors are not able to refuse to do an abortion if they don't want to? Because I'd like to know that.
It's a good question.
Yeah. But also in that same bit where he was talking about, when they're talking about abortion, He did have what I saw was a negative where he tried to sort of relay to student loans about how it's just like a promise that they'll never get through, which is what he was saying that the national abortion protections are basically just a promise that are never going to happen because
right. I understand that he went into the legislature and everything. How she'd never get the vote. She'd never get the vote. Yeah,
right.
I get that, but
and he kind of tied it into the same with the student loans. How they can't get the votes to forgive all the student loans.
I sort of see the line you're drawing. Like, I guess it wasn't fair for him to stick the two together, but I'm kind of glad he got that in there about the student loans, though,
sure,
because they have been jerking people around with those. I'm one who's been affected by it. I mean, right, I won't go into that whole thing, but they have jerked that federal aid, whatever student aid program.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I just thought it kind of detracted from really making a good point about.
Yeah, it kind of muddies the water.
Yeah,
I could see that. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're sticking together two things that don't really belong together, you know, but.
Yeah. Another good point I thought he made, he made several. Some of them are just basically stuff you've already heard from him, though.
Right.
But one other good point was the many times he was talking about immigration. He talked about how Joe Biden doesn't necessarily need.
Yep, I'm going to get into that in my notes.
To close the border.
Yep.
And I thought that was a good point to make.
It was a wonderful point.
Right?
I'm going to sing it. I'm going to sing that song in a minute, brother.
Right. And also together with that was what I thought was my favorite, funniest part. I'm sure some people might think his bit redoing Kamala's "I'm Speaking" was probably the funniest one, but I liked how he said he'll go with Kamala down to the White House, and they'll have to go wake up Joe Biden at 4:00 in the afternoon from his nap, wake him up and say, "Let's go sign a bill." I thought that was so funny.
It was funny. But it's borderline rude, though, too. A lot of people would say that, you know?
I guess.
But that's Trump for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, but it is sad, you know? I mean, I don't mind that he did it. I'm just saying, some people would say that.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like it'd be true.
It is true.
Right.
That's why it's fun. It's funny because it's true. We all know it to be true, too, you know?
Right. But that's, I guess mostly it for, what I got on Trump. I don't think it really hurts him very much in the end. I don't think it really helps him too much either. But for Kamala Harris, I had a few notes. I think she performed decently well as, what she's trying to do for herself. I mean, obviously, I'm biased. I'm not voting for her. I don't like her. I think she's a terrible candidate. But as far as just her being Kamala Harris, I thought she did okay. Because I feel like we didn't really learn anything more from her, and much of what she said is just like reformatted campaign speeches.
I heard her tell a story I've never heard her say before about this one about how, what was it? The lady they lived with, or the lady who took care of her, had a small business. What's that? I've never heard that before. She's like, my mom worked. She's like, but the lady who took care of us ran a small business. And I'm like, what? It didn't make any sense to me, and I've never heard that before.
Well, another one that nobody has ever heard before is the fact that she's a gun owner.
Oh, yeah. I found that to be quite interesting myself, but I didn't note it. But, yeah. Because it's when you just roll your eyes and you just think, what?
Well, there's a couple of statements she made that made me roll my eyes. It's like when she said that Putin would eat Trump's lunch. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, right. They're eating your lunch right now.
I know. I think it's interesting that we didn't watch this together because some of my notes bump into yours a little bit, as you'll see. But
other than that, she definitely told quite a few lies and did not get questioned about.
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah.
I saw a side-by-side comparison of how many times he was fact-checked compared to how many times she was fact-checked.
Right.
You know? And it's like typical.
Well, the fact-checker on CNN, whatever, is the Daniel Dale or something like that?
Yeah, the dude.
Yeah, the dude. Well, Kamala only lied one time, but Trump 33 times. His preliminary report.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the particular ones that she brought up again that I'm pointing out is the whole no guardrails thing. Imagine Trump without any guardrails.
Yeah.
And she's misrepresenting what the whole immunity thing was from the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, that gets misrepresented, but they mean to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. She means to.
And on the guardrails thing, it's not actually him. It's imagine her without any guardrails.
Right,
Didn't I say that last time? Because
we both kind of
she's the one that we've never seen in office, this kind of office before.
Right.
Well, I mean, but she's pretty close. We have seen her in office, actually. But it's really like taking the training wheels off of her, the guardrails off of her, and just letting her go off leash.
Yeah. Right. I think that was mostly it for Kamala. And then, I guess we pretty much sort of hinted at it already. The only other comments I was going to make is about the moderators being terrible.
Yeah.
It almost makes CNN look...
I think they looked the part. They looked very professional, but I don't think they really were as professional as they looked.
Oh, no, definitely not in my opinion. And it doesn't seem like in most people's opinion. Because they wouldn't press her on very much after they would ask her. Like, when they asked Kamala Harris about, like the first question, if she agreed or would say if people are better off now than they were 4 years ago.
Oh, yeah, and she totally deflected it.
Yeah, completely. She started off with saying she was from a middle or working class family.
And she's the only one on stage who has a plane.
Her
she hit that again.
Yeah, she calls her opportunity economy.
Which sounds just like Trump's opportunity zones that he
Right.
created in big cities.
Yeah. So they don't press her on getting her try to actually answer the question. They never tried to fact check her lies like they did
Trump
with some Trump's comments.
Yeah, Trump, a couple times they pressed him over and over. They're like, but will you answer the question though? We asked you to hop, skip, and jump, and you jump, skipped, and hopped. So we're gonna ask you again.
Yeah, like the January 6th, do you regret anything on January 6th? And the other one was, does he think it's in America's interest that Ukraine wins the war?
Oh, yeah.
He didn't really answer it, and they tried to push him on it. So not a very friendly...
Well, you can tell it's a loaded question.
Yeah, of course. Because if he says no, he's immediately Putin's puppet.
Mm-hmm.
And if he says yes, well, he could be
He could be stepping in a quagmire.
Yeah, right.
How's it in our interest? Why do you think it's in our interest?
Right.
Imagine the headline in the next day of paper. Trump says American interests will benefit if we win more in Ukraine. Something like that. You know what I mean? Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, if you're ready to get into it, I really don't have too much to say, but I was just watching live, and like I said, a lot of stuff, I just rolled my eyes. Both candidates, all of it.
Sure,
The people, the moderators.
Right.
The whole thing, just right off the top, if I could sum it all up in one word, it'd be mediocre.
Mm-hmm, sure.
His performance was mediocre. Her performance was mediocre.
Right.
I didn't really react to very much. But about half an hour in, about like what you were saying, I mean, I remember the crowd size comments and all this kind of stuff. But for me, what got me furious, like if I were at home, I would have been screaming at the TV kind of thing. You know me, The first thing I reacted to where I would have been screaming at Kamala Harris, something at her. Instead I wrote it down because I was at work. But she was talking about how he had blocked the bill that would provide so much funding and so many more troops at the border and all this stuff. And somehow with a magic phone that only works seemingly in this one instance, he calls and kills the bill. Okay. And, that's the reason. She gives that as an answer. That's her reason that they haven't done more on the border. Because they had asked her. They said, you were tasked. They told the live version, right? They said, you've been tasked with studying the root causes or whatever, right? Whatever they're saying now, that new lingo. You've been tasked with figuring out the root causes of the migration problem at the southern border. And she gave this fake-o answer about how, well, he killed the bill that would have fixed everything. Right? Yeah. Sort of answer. Well, I'm screaming. I'm screaming. I'm like, you don't need any permission from Congress. It's laughable if you know the Constitution. The executive branch of this government only has limited and enumerated powers, just like all of the other branches, and they're not very big.
Right.
And defending our borders with our troops and our army and that kind of stuff and all those resources and monies, that's top priority for the executive branch. They don't need any act or any allotment of monies or anything like that from the Congress to be able to do their job as the executive branch of the government. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, in certain cases, you could argue, yes, they do need funding and blah, blah. Sure. But these things are doled out. They've got the money. I refrain from using dirty words, okay? But they've got the money. So it's farcical to think that they need some new allotment with an extra little cherry on top of funds to be able to go down and defend the border. And if Congress doesn't give these funds, then, the executive branch just can't. They can't do anything. Nope. Laughable. Well, it took Trump, and I love this. It took Trump about 20 minutes, 22 by my count, to correct her and make that point that you said. You don't need Congress to do that.
Right.
Because it's true. Anybody who knows the Constitution would know that.
Right.
You don't need Congress. If you're going to go to war with Mexico over the border, okay, you need Congress. But to go down and just create a hard border, no, you don't need Congress to do that. Next, so about 12 minutes after that comment, she made a comment at 9:40. I was watching live for a certain point, so that's just how I kept track. At 9:40, she was talking about how she has a plan for oil production and how she wants to get off of a foreign dependency on oil. And I'm screaming again, right? I'm like, well, then why did you guys kill the XL pipeline?
Yep.
It was one of the first acts. Yes, he sure did. It took him 16 minutes.
Yeah.
So 16 minutes later, he corrected her and said, well, why on earth did your administration allow Russia the Nord Stream 2 at the same time you kill the American XL?
Yep.
So kudos to Trump. I mean, and in this regard, he doesn't usually do this. I'm usually sitting at home going, darn it, why didn't he say X or why didn't he say Y? He did a great job on these 2 points.
Yeah, definitely.
And they happen to be about the only 2 things I really yelled at her about. Now, I'm not saying she did a great job, and I'm not saying she didn't tell a bunch of lies, because she did, and I don't think she did a great job. Excuse me. But most of it was just eye roll stuff for me. Eye roll, eye roll, eye roll.
Yeah, I get that.
The only other things that I have written down, just as like 2 little, well, because I do have a few more things written down, but I have 2 quotes that I absolutely loved. One from Trump and one from Kamala.
Okay.
He said at one point that we have a president who doesn't even know if he's alive.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that. That's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, it's just hilarious.
Right.
And then Harris says about Donald, he says this war would be over, because he was saying this war would be over if I become president. If I'm president-elect, not even president, whatever he was saying. She has this quote where she says, this war would be over because he would give it up.
Yeah.
And I was pissed about that. I'm thinking, like, isn't that good? Isn't that rich?
Right.
This is the administration that just quit on Afghanistan, dropped everything. Guys, stop. If you're holding something, drop it. Is it worth $1 million? We don't care. Drop it.
Right.
Leave it there in the dirt. Let's all take 3 steps back.
Right.
That's them.
Right.
So how good?
Right. I mean, well, not only that. I mean, more specifically to what they're talking about. She's the one who's in the administration during a time when Russia took.
Right. And Trump was good about talking about that too.
Took from Ukraine.
Exactly.
And it was their buddy from slightly more than 4 years ago, 10 years ago, in 2014, when they went into Crimea.
Yep.
So who's the one allowing
exactly. It's always the Democrats that do it.
Who's giving
Remember, I mean, I hate that you're making me bring this up again, but it's one of those things I'll never get out of my brain, no matter how long I live. If I'm reincarnated, I will come back with this memory of what's her name as Secretary of State, Clinton, doing the reset button with Russia, and they didn't even spell it right.
Yeah.
They screwed up the reset. From the get-go. I mean, like, these are laughable people. They get up. Our leaders for years and years and years just must be the biggest joke, to these other leaders.
Right.
You know what I mean? But anyway, let me try to get through these last just real quick points here real fast. But I totally agree with you that he really missed some key opportunities. I think they could have been key opportunities to hit some things. Once again, he didn't mention the Snopes thing, which really drives me nuts. And I know I was just talking to you about it, but I might have done it on recording. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah.
I think so too. So I want to mention that he failed to name Snopes because that's a liberal publication.
Right. Yeah.
They would know it in a heartbeat. It's speaking their own language. He should say Snopes, 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 Snopes. How hard is that? Put it in your vocabulary.
Yep, I heard other people say that too.
I know. Instead, he went on this tangent about how Tucker said it and all these Fox News personalities, and it's like, dude, name networks or articles or publications or something, but all you have to do is say Snopes.
Yeah, right.
That'll make your point in one word. You don't have to say any other point about it. Just say this has been debunked by Snopes.com. Look it up yourself.
Yep.
Everybody, look it up today. Okay. In a way, it was kind of like a tale of two facial features, or two faces. A tale of two faces.
Oh, yeah.
The way they have it put up. And I think she did an effective job. I have to say this. This is my one thing about her. I'll give her like a little corner of a gold star or something. But she was good at making these like perplexed, intrigued, angry, whatever. She was good at emoting, you might say, while he was talking and sort of painting a picture with her face.
Yeah, I've heard people say that she was making faces.
Yeah, and not necessarily like bad faces all the time. Now, sometimes he would do a little bit of that too. I think sometimes you do a little bit of that naturally, but I think she did a good job of it. And I think it's interesting how it's covered now, the debates and stuff, because they did that with him and Joe Biden, I remember too, where they just put them side by side like these blow-ups, like almost like you're staring at two blown up pictures of the people side by side, but it's their live living faces, I think that's just kind of interesting, that dichotomy you get between the two faces. And the other thing I'll point out is I've heard a lot of chit chat about whether or not she had an earpiece in her ear. Have you seen any of that going around?
No, I hadn't seen any of that.
I think it's intriguing. So I'll just throw that out there, but it's being labeled one of those conspiracy theories. It's already being labeled a conspiracy theory, but supposedly it's gone around before. They've accused a bunch of Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people of always having earpieces, and this is always being debunked.
Yeah.
But I thought it was intriguing. So, and I love a good conspiracy theory, so I just wanted to mix that in there.
Right. Nope, I hadn't heard that.
Supposedly, can I just tell you?
Sure.
I'll finish it real fast, but she was wearing pearl earrings.
Oh.
And supposedly there's this fancy pearl. No, supposedly there's something on the market or a proposed product or something that's in pre-production or something like that. And it's like a pearl earring that talks. It like somehow throws the volume into your ear from the little pearl.
All right. I mean, I don't think it really matters, even if it is true.
I don't see how much it matters either.
Yeah.
Same people that'd be talking her through it are the same people who train her, are the same people she talks to on the phone when she gets out of there. What I mean? We all kind of figure who those people are anyway.
Right. Yep. So, all right, listeners, that is all we got for the debate. So up next is going to be a interview that we recorded recently with a fellow named Manuel from the Stretchgoose podcast. He also recently invited us to be on his show. There will be links to the show of us being guests on his podcast, as well as a link to his show, so you can go follow and subscribe to him. We hope you enjoy this interview, and here it is. All right, listeners, we have a special guest interview for you today. This is going to be Manuel from the Stretchgoose podcast. He recently had us on his own podcast, so if you would go listen to that, we greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure he would too. So, Manuel, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I can't wait to get into this.
Hopefully, we'll have a good time here. So how did you get started in podcasting?
Back in 2015, I got one of those tough sheds, about 60 square feet. And I built it and put all the equipment into it to do stop motion. And because I write screenplays and I do some art, and I found out that stop motion is a gigantic pain in the you-know-what. And, 60, like a little 5-second clip test that I did of a elephant throwing a beaver over its shoulder was about 120 shots, and it took about 3.5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And then I did the math in my head, and I was like, that's a long time just to get one scene done. If 120 shots is 5 seconds, if that, you do about 20 minutes, it's years of your life. And then I was like, well, I have this space. I get stressed out a lot at work, so might as well use it for something. So I decided to podcast, but not as a hobby more than anything, not nothing of financial gain. It was just, lower the blood pressure, scream about the world. Nobody knows about it. Rinse and repeat. And that went on for several years until I ran into my brother in terms of inviting him on one time, and that turned into 15 shows. And then from there it went to, let's see if we can actually make money on it and get a little bit more serious with it. And that's how the the fonts media thing kind of got formed. And I had already been doing a sports podcast with my son, and I already had the Stretch Goose thing. And then we started Random Thoughts, which is just when him and I get together and babble about whatever for however long we do it. And then he started his own government politics type thing called World Ablaze. And then I took all my episodes that I can find on my hard drives after all the RSS feeds went away, and I threw them into like a greatest hits album, and it's called The Lost Tapes of the Stretch Goose Network. Even though it's not really a network, it just the title sounded good, and
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
Well, that's pretty cool. We also have another podcast that we do that's more entertainment. We call it the Wiki Wacky Radio Show. Um,
Mm,
it's pretty fun. We
okay.
do kind of random stuff.
Yeah, and it sort of came out of, I mean, I have my degree's in literature, and so I like to write and stuff like that too. Over the years, I've written for newspapers and submitted articles for other publications, other outlets, and that kind of thing. And so that's also up on our website. We sometimes put up our own articles we'll write and publish. And we also do some neat little skits and, poetry and different things like that. So it's that Wiki Wacky radio show is just sort of an outlet for our creative side too. But
Oh,
here
that's cool.
on yeah, but here on Conservative Conversations, we mostly talk about politics and the news of the day. So
Oh,
one of the
okay.
things I was going to ask you is about your politics and whether they've changed over the years or whether or not you've always been kind of set in your beliefs and how you vote or
Um, my my positions have always been fluid because the world changes. 100 years ago, X was a thing. Now it's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like if I'm 100%,
yeah,
let me think. I mean, I'll just say it's fluid because it's hard to explain because it's like if abortion, I'm about to talk myself into a hole, which if you are a random thoughts guy, you know that I do this, is I will answer a question and slowly end up in a ditch. So I should probably stop. We'll just leave it at fluid.
I think that's a fair answer.
it is. I mean, the world's always in flux.
Yeah,
Everything's
definitely.
always
Yeah, and my
changing.
examples are terrible. Like I'm trying to equate it to something, and then I think in my head as I'm talking, I'm like, nope, 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 throw that one away.
Well, I always think it's funny how often that happens that I'll ask somebody about their politics and the first thing that gets brought up is abortion. I don't That's fascinating. I mean, that's such a litmus test for politics,
Is
isn't
it
it?
really?
It seems to be.
Huh. Well, for me, it just came up because it's the news that's in the front most of the time,
Mhm.
and I thought it'd be more of a relatable thing. But then the more I think about it, no, not to what I was trying to say.
Well, I think maybe a topic that could be something that you might have more fluid opinions on is something like global warming or climate change, because
Yeah, but that's
presumably,
true.
like more, concrete data that actually proves what's going on could help change somebody's opinions on it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if they said that yeah, but they also changed the phrases too. Global
Sure.
warming, climate change,
Yeah.
like that's like it's like every I want to say every generation, I guess,
Sure. Yeah.
is when they change the term. And that's one of the things that really fascinates me about politics is the fact that they do change everything as if you didn't know it was happening before,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Like back in the 70s, the big environmental thing was like the Earth was getting cooler.
It
It
was
was
global
gonna, we're
cooling.
going, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Mhm.
global cooling was going to happen.
And then in the
But
80s and 90s, it became global warming. And then when
all of
you
a
hit the
sudden,
2000s, suddenly it's just climate change because they can't explain the data either being stagnant or not really swaying one way or the other. So now it's just climate change.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the Earth is magically getting hotter. Some people might know that
Well,
reference.
California and Florida were supposed to be underwater by now. So
I know. I was supposed to be dead. Supposed to
Right.
drown.
And I was actually at dinner with a friend last night. We were kind of talking about global warming. And, one of the things I told him is how some of it's a big farce is because some of the people who are pushing the climate change agenda haven't sold
Yeah.
their beach houses. They still have their beach houses.
oh yeah.
Like Obama buying lake property over the last 10 years.
Uh-huh. Yep.
I'm really curious why he's doing that if these islands are supposed to be underwater by whatever AOC said it is.
Well,
Right.
my favorite
20
example,
something.
I used to work for a high income husband and wife, and they both drove Priuses. Now, they were very conservative people, hardcore Republican voters, but the husband once said to me, he said, somebody like what's his name who invented the internet? I can't think of it right now.
Um, Al Gore.
Al Gore. Yeah, he says Al Gore takes all these jets, private jets all around the globe to go give a 10-minute speech and say, save the whales. He said, but me and my wife, we both drive Priuses. So what more can we do? Everybody's going around saying, save the environment, do this, do that. But the people who really push this stuff, they're not doing anything to move the needle.
No, and they never will because
Mhm.
it'll ruin their lifestyle.
Yep.
Right.
It's like the Starbucks thing blows my mind. They hire a new CEO. He lives out in California, and he has to jump on a jet 3 days a week and fly round trip over 1,000 miles. And that jet is not environmentally friendly.
Right.
And yet, when you go buy your Starbucks, it's an eco-friendly cup, an eco-friendly straw, like all this weird stuff they're promoting. And you're like, well, why is this guy polluting the entire skyline just
Uh-huh.
to run your, like, I don't understand. Nobody, it's one of those things that just does not compute in my mind.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's liberal policies for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, have you always lived in California?
Yes, I have always suffered in California.
I see. Well, I mean, that probably explains why then, because like I know I wouldn't be able to move out to California and live there and be happy. I've got some family in California. I've got a cousin who lives in Burbank, and I think he's got like $1 million home that for us here in Ohio would probably cost about $200,000. So I don't know how people I don't survive out in California unless your income's very high. I can't imagine it,
The,
but
well, the reason our costs are so high is because of the overregulation in California, the extreme restrictions on housing, the fact that we have two different blends of gasoline, one for the winter and one for the summer, and I can't remember which one costs more to make. Um, there's a lot of restrictions and on not only housing but where to build, how to build, what to have. Now they have now the houses, if they go up, they have to have solar panel requirements. Everything is just priced so high through regulation that a lot of builders won't come out here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you have less housing, and which drives the price up. And then in terms of the gas price skyrocketing in California, it's the same idea. They create these environmental blends, which is not environmentally friendly to make and costs the company more to produce. So then when they sell it to gas station, whatever, they have to throw their pricing up and a little higher just to make money for themselves.
yeah.
And it's like this really vicious cycle that this place is in, to the point where insurance companies won't even come out here and maintain coverage in California. We've had so many leave.
Yeah, we've talked about that a couple times on our
We
show.
have
Yeah,
been covering that. Yeah.
Yeah, they just leave because they can't afford to keep policies open because of the regulations in the insurance industry through California.
Yeah.
It's like we have, I don't even understand this, but we have the ratio is so off in the state legislator. It's like all blue and like two or three red
Yeah.
politicians in there. And it's like it's a losing battle. And these guys get whatever they want. They spend their money wherever they want to spend it, and then they complain about not having it. It's like Gavin Newsom gets up there and he talks about a shortfall, in like they're running in the mine. I think they're the last time I looked at it was like um negative 10 or 12 billion dollars negative on the budget.
Didn't they
Right.
recently
And
have like a surplus
They
due to
did.
all the COVID funding?
they had a COVID surplus, yes,
Yeah,
because they kept taking the government money. And then what they did with it was they turned around and gave it away basically for free to all low income people who didn't use it to pay any bills.
right.
And now you got no money. And we also, revenue isn't here because people keep leaving. The taxes are too high. The housing is too high. So these guys are getting on their U-Hauls and they're taking off.
Yep.
The richer businesses have all fled for the most part. So now there's not enough money to support these hilarious policies. So now our taxes are going up next year, our state taxes.
Well,
So
I think that's part of one of the things that's scary for our nation, and considering somebody like Kamala Harris, like you were asking when we sat with you on your segment about Kamala
yeah,
Harris. Um, that's part of what really scares me. And I really hope that our nation does reject her, because the idea of putting somebody like Kamala Harris from, the great liberal country of California in charge of the nation is, I'm afraid of seeing some of those policies and, some of the structure around California happen to the rest of the nation. So, gosh, I hope she loses. I don't know what
well,
to say about that.
what is that? What's that saying? So goes California, goes the
Yeah.
something like that.
As
Yeah,
goes California, so
as
goes
goes
the nation.
California. Yeah,
Yeah.
that in some aspects that's actually come to pass, but
Yeah. Well, I've heard,
I,
especially when it comes to like California's environmental regulations, like anytime they introduce something new, there's like a whole bunch of states that get on board with what California's doing just to be in line with them.
but why?
I have no
You know,
idea.
like I don't get that. Like
I
they're
think it's
just a state
because,
like anybody else.
well, they're one of the largest economies in the world, though, aren't they?
I know, but
Yeah, and then they follow a lot of the same. Well, I shouldn't say it that way, but I think they try to follow a lot of the same regulations as the Europeans. I sort of think that's where the logic is. Like they almost want to be Europeans or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is.
God,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
know,
really know
man.
either. Um, I did have a question a second ago about you living in California. Uh, shoot, I know Frank, you had one right about
Yeah.
California. Go ahead, since we're still talking about that.
All right. I was going to ask you, Ohio just went for recreational marijuana, just got passed here. And it has taken effect. Like they gave out like 100 licenses for these places that were already medical dispensaries. They can be dual licensed to also sell recreational. And I know California has been recreational for a number of years, maybe 10 or more. I'm not exactly sure, but I was just curious if you might, being a California insider,
Oh,
yeah, if you might, sort of know some of the trends or sort of things that we could expect for the economy or for the culture, for our neighborhoods, our municipalities with this recreational marijuana. Is there anything that you would expect us to see that maybe California has experienced over the years?
the only the only thing the only thing California's experienced from that is an inability to use the revenue.
Hmm.
And that's it. And if you guys know any state out there that puts this in place through whether it's taxing and however the revenue flows in those states, is if you know how to use it, it'll benefit you because everybody that everybody everybody that likes it, they buy it and they buy a ton of it. And that's the only part that is beneficial in terms of its overall health and everything. It's a dumpster fire out here. There's a lot of people committing crimes just to get enough money just to go buy a recreational thing. You got a lot of people uh, faking the license side of it just to sell it, and then you got some people that are faking medical uses with doctors willing to sign for it because the doctor gets a kickback just so they can get their hands on it. that stuff you're also going to see, and that's going to be a huge challenge for a lot of states if they're not ready for it.
It definitely sounds like a can of worms. Because the first thing that popped in my head as you were talking about, you know, the proceeds from these sales, the revenue that the state will see is, we also have gambling here in Ohio. We went, I think it was maybe 10, 15, something like that years ago. They allowed
Okay.
gambling, and supposedly, the big casinos and all these casino halls, whatever, where they do the video gambling. It was supposed to bring so much revenue to the state for education and for all of this. But then, after 15 years go by, they run these stories about where is the funding going? We haven't seen any effect. The schools aren't any better. They don't have any more money in their budgets. They're just as cash strapped as before the gambling was here. So where does the income go?
Yeah. I don't know where it goes either, at least for California, because it doesn't, there's nothing being improved. It's kind of like when Gavin Newsom, our governor here, was talking about how he needed a ruling on the right to camp so we could get rid of the homeless problem, which you can get rid of it without it, but that was his excuse. So they finally get the court ruling on it. So then he sits there and he goes, "Every city better get this done. If they don't, I'm holding funding to your city and into anything that goes on in that city until for these certain municipalities, what have you, unless you move the homeless off." He has held all that money.
Hmm.
I don't know what he's doing with it. I don't know where it's going. It's like there's no explanation whatsoever coming out of Sacramento. And there are cities trying their best to move this. LA's got the biggest problem. They have whole bridges full of cities of homeless people,
Yeah.
and nobody is seeing this money. It's similar to what you're saying. It's like I don't understand. I don't understand how the bookkeeping is done in government. It really blows my mind.
Yeah,
It's baffling to me.
it is baffling.
Yeah, definitely. So as someone who's always lived in California, um, and especially the way you've described how things are there, what do you think keeps people living there who don't agree with what's going on in the state? Because
Um,
you mentioned we talked about how a bunch of people have left, but what about the people who are still there? What do you think keeps them there?
well, the people that are still here, I mean, if I had to put a number on it, I would say about 70% of them can't afford to do it. They just can't afford to sell, buy, reestablish, get a new job in another area. There's a good percentage of the population that just can't.
Hmm.
There are a certain number of the population that just loves the ocean. I don't know why. I don't know why that would keep. I would never. That would never keep me here.
Right.
But apparently the ocean, the beach, that is a thing. If you are a lifer in LA, you love Disneyland. There's certain amenities that just keep people here, and they're willing to pay through the nose to enjoy it and enjoy, and they're willing to pay all the taxes. Those people are just here that exist like that. And there's those in the middle like myself that can do it, but you're in a situation where you're in a family, you're in a marriage, you got to convince them all, and
Right.
that is a slog.
Right. I bet.
Yeah. So
Do you have any hope that eventually things will start to change in California?
how does
Because
California turn red?
Yeah, it's a good
I
It
question.
don't know
won't.
about turning red
It,
completely, but at least hopefully some of the Democrats at least start to moderate some.
it
But
won't.
yeah, it'd be great if it went red. That'd be nice.
It won't.
But yeah,
We have a numbers problem in
right.
California. I think it's 3-1 Democrat to Republican.
Mm.
If the last time I looked at it, I mean we had enough Republicans and independents sign the signatures to have Gavin Newsom yanked, and we ran out Larry Elder, and
Right.
that's not enough when it comes down to the whole state voting,
Right.
because, like I said, it's 3-1 in numbers, and it's going to take decades of convincing, and it may not even happen. I have no faith. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Right. Well, since we're just about out of time here, how about you let people know where they can find your podcast or where to follow you at?
You can find the podcast by typing in Stretchgoose Podcast. You can also get in touch with me at Stretchgoose at fontsmedia.com. And you can even go to Apple Podcasts and check out the Fonts Media channel and enjoy all 5 or 6 shows that are on there.
All right, great. We'll have links for your podcast and your network in our show notes so people can click on it and find you.
Okay, cool.
Well, we greatly appreciate you coming on our show, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again some other time.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. Can't wait to do it again.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you.
All right, listeners, we hope you enjoyed that interview, and we also hope you enjoyed this great conversation about the debates. And be sure to let us know what you think about the debates by leaving a comment on our YouTube channel, the video or the upload. You can also send us an email. Those email addresses are in the show notes. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and many other major podcast platforms. And also be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search at Conservative Conversations 92. We would greatly appreciate it.
That's right. We hope you might share us with a friend or two and encourage them to become paid subscribers so that they can have the same access to our exclusive content the way that you do. We also hope you might consider checking out the Stretchgoose podcast, and please let them know we sent you. And as always, we thank you for listening.